Hi, everyone. Very good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're logging in from. And thank you, Marco and Alessandro, for sharing your thoughts on building a sustainable third party management program. Indeed, more and more organizations are leaning on their third parties, or let me just call it extended organizations, who play a critical role in the success of any business. In fact, I was having a conversation with the head of supply chain risk, a large services company in Copenhagen. And an interesting thing that came up in the discussion, and I quote him, is that I am not just looking for a vendor risk management program. I am keen to understand how I can optimize the overall relationship with a vendor. And I think that's incredibly powerful. How I understand the market is it's just not about onboarding the right vendor. It's also about strategically engaging with them throughout their life cycle so that you get the best out of your extended ecosystem. I think this is a perfect segue to the topic in hand, which is building Veracity of Resilience program, integrating third party management. In this session, I will ask our panelists to share their thoughts on how a critical function like third party management can be made resilient. I am certain that this pandemic has put all of our plans and strategies to test. So it will be incredible to hear some stories and learn from their experiences. My name is Rishik Bose. I'm an Associate Director GRC Solutions at MetricStream, based in the UK and responsible for our business in the Nordics. I'm very excited to be moderating this panel at the MetricStream GRC Summit Leadership Series and have the pleasure of hosting four amazing panelists on this call today. Let me just quickly call them out, and I will then ask them to introduce themselves very, very quickly. So I have with me on the panel in alphabetical order Caroline Leduc, Senior Legal Advisor at Desjardins, or the French way to say would be Desjardins, if I'm not wrong. Then we have Fernanda Beraldi, Senior Director, Ethics Compliance at Cummins. Jacinta Gunavikrama, Global Head, Conduct, Transformation and Third-Party Risk at HSBC. And lastly, Sadhna Deo, Director, Quality, Regulatory and Compliance at Trimble. Welcome, all of you. And now, if you don't mind, can I please request you to introduce yourself very quickly before we start off the discussion? Caroline, let's start with you.
Yes, hi, thank you, Rashik. My name is Caroline Leduc. I'm based in Canada. I'm General Counsel for Calabria Financial Services and Senior Counsel for Desjardins, which is one of the biggest credit union worldwide. I've been working in the financial industry since 5 years, practicing commercial law for 15.
And you next.
Yes. Hi, my name is Fernanda Giraldi. I'm a Senior Director of Ethics and Compliance at Cummins Inc. I've been with Cummins for 5 years. Cummins is a global company with presence in over 200 countries, 63,000 employees, 24,000 suppliers, 6,000 dealers and distributor locations, and 66 JVs. So a ton of third parties for us to look into. I am originally from Brazil, and I'm based in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Jacinta, over to you.
Jacinta Gunavikrama. I'm based in the UK. I'm the Global Head for Conduct and Third-Party Risk and Distribution for HSBC Wealth and Personal Banking arm. I have around 20 years experience in financial services across few financial services industries. So I'm so excited to listen to all the panelists and also understand what are the queries if there's time to go through the Q&A.
Excellent. Last but not the least, Sadhna from Bay Area.
Yeah, this is Sadhana Diot. I'm in the Bay Area. I am working for Trimble as a corporate quality director. I'm responsible for globally for quality, reliability, compliance, as well as supplier management. And I have worked in the past is like NetApps, Electron, and always in the Bay Area. But I think is the third-party management become one of the key. I think throughout my time, 20 years, I see all the changes that how this supply chain took the turn, and it's become one of the very critical aspects. So it's a very good journey, and I think it's a very interesting panel. where you will be seeing is more and more risk are coming in the future, and how the third party is going to be managed. So it's really a journey. I don't see the destination yet.
Excellent, Sadhna. Thank you. Thank you. You already actually asked the first question I had for all the panelists here. But let me just contextualize this. So as I see this, that as the third party network expands, the impact surface of organization increases. It has become kind of necessary to also increase the depth and breadth of the risk evaluation for the extended ecosystem. So now my question to all of you, and I appreciate that it's slightly generic, is how can organizations overcome the inherent complexity of the third, fourth, fifth party network to arrive at the required intelligence? Let me start with Jacinta, and then I'll probably take someone else can comment on top of that. So Jacinta, over to you.
Thank you, Rishi. So for me, there are multiple solutions or multiple approaches a firm can follow in addressing these complex relationships, whether it's a third, fourth, or the fifth party. And not just the relationship, but with the relationship, it brings certain types of risks. So some of the approaches the organizations can follow could be complementary to each other, and some could be supplementary. So therefore, it's very important for organizations to have a very clear visibility of the service they receive from their third, fourth, or fifth parties. I think it's a fundamental piece to address. Having that visibility across the life cycle or the operational system. And more clarity and knowledge you have on the third parties, which is something we experience collectively. I'm sure everyone on this call experienced with the pandemic of COVID pandemic. Having that knowledge and the visibility on the performances of these third parties, as well as the fourth and fifth, gave us that additional edge to have that few understand the challenges and work along with them. So for me, I think it's not just like, is it complex? Yes, it is a complex relationship, but it's more of how do you build that, make that relationship to a partnership and build that capabilities using either data or other enhancements to drive that partnership. I think the concept is the partnership. That's the fundamental piece I'm seeing, using the partnership concept to drive a better outcome to your customers. End of the day, that's what matters as an organization.
Fantastic, and I think you're spot on. Keeping it as a considering it as a partnership rather than a transaction certainly helps. Caroline, is there anything that you would want to add on top of this?
Yes, I think that first of all, yes, you have to really know the services your partner is offering during the partnership. But for me, the most important thing is that ahead of this partnership, you have to do a very good due diligence. The key is research. I mean, when you're in a merger and acquisition context, you do a very thorough due diligence before acquiring a competitor or another company. But not all companies do that thorough investigation before signing a partnership. But in my mind, it's even more important to complete that due diligence before a partnership than an acquisition, because when you do sign a partnership, you live with them and you really work end in end. So I think that's even more important to plan ahead, basically.
Perfect. Sadhna, any comments from your side?
Yes, I think I'll go definitely is towards that how you plan ahead when anytime you are engaging the suppliers. And the first is you have to ensure that you have a strategic planning, and in that one is make sure that in your planning is that you are looking at how you're engaging your partner. What is your, you are looking the short term, you are as well as you're looking the long term. In the short term is from 3 months from now or the 6 months now or 1 year from now, what are your expectations or what exactly you are looking, and what is you're going for the long term. It's not something is that you will be looking somebody is that you will be having the business only for a very short time, but overall you have to engage your partner is for the long term, right? So, and how you're planning. So my thing is, anytime you are planning is, I think risk and the opportunities are one of the key area when you are looking. It's not only you are very limited to that, what is your product qualities, how you will be satisfying your customer, but what will happen when these natural disasters are coming, or what will happen if there is any country they have some political or economic, the political or engagement is going on politically, the situation is coming, so how you are engaging. So there is not only one risk, it's just an example, but you have to look at the multiple risks there, and you will be reviewing those risks much more often, or very, that what is happening. And especially is nowadays you just see it, that all those pandemic or politically, if you see it, the China and US, the trade wars are going on. So it's become much more critical now, as if you see like 5 years ago or the 10 years ago, the things are changing very fast for the climate point of view, for the political point of view, and every company has the business is pretty much is, the globally. If you want to survive, I think this is one of the key area where you're establishing your business and how you are going to make the profit and with your supplier. So to me is, in order to be successful for any company, is the key is how you are qualifying your supplier, what due diligence you are doing, what are the risks there, what are the opportunities are there, because those opportunity will become actually is your solution for the future. So it's really key that how you're putting all that information together, and how you're engaging them, and what are the engagements are. That's another risk. And moving forward, how you're monitoring. It's not something is you did do that due diligence today, but on ongoing basis, how you are controlling them, how you're monitoring them, what are the risks you are looking, what you're mitigating, what is your process for the mitigation. So yeah, it's important to keep the relationship, but at the same time, I think to me is very critical that how you're managing your risk as well as the opportunities.
Right. So from what I heard, you're saying that a continuous performance management or due diligence or check would definitely keep the partnership much stronger. That's wonderful. Fernanda, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I gotta agree. I mean, it's hard to come after three so talented speakers that talked about relationship and doing due diligence, and really understanding more of what the risks that the partner can bring. And Sadhana that talked about tracking and monitoring, right? For me, what you're not tracking, you're not measuring. So yes, you can have the best due diligence, but due diligence is a snapshot in time. So you do the due diligence, you find red flags, you organize them, and you mitigate them. Hopefully, you onboard this vendor, this distributor, this dealer, and that is everything you did before is a snapshot in time. So you need to, after that, yes, establish a good relationship, because then when you have a good relationship in place, it's much easier for the vendor to understand, vendor or third party to understand what are your values, and how do they go about helping you in your business and integrating your values as part of their values, right? The other thing is continuous monitoring, tracking, and measuring. If you're not managing it in this way, you're probably,
because you absolutely know your volumes are going up, and we do not want an impact to our customers who are already challenged. So having that visibility, having the data, having the timely data, and also having a governance which is flexible, which is agile, in a way that you can escalate gaps or challenges to your internal senior management, as well as to the senior management and decision makers in your third party organization. So the second element is more onto the strategy should work around the right governance and capabilities within the data and MI. The third one out of the four items I would say is, have you got the regular testing capability? Now, I will step back onto this and give you a little bit of flavor around it, what I mean by regular testing. Generally, organizations do talk about, especially in financial services, we talk a lot about the three lines of defense. Now, large organizations would be very much capable of running first, second, and third line, i.e., your business, your compliance, and your internal audit teams running multiple audits or multiple testings to make sure that your controls are working, or your processes are not broken, or your resilience model is working. Whereas if you are looking at your third parties, have you got that capability built within your third party, or do you have a relationship or an agreement with your third party that you can step into their data or you can step into their operations and do this testing yourselves, so that you as an organization has that clear insight and clear visibility on the controls that are working or the controls that are not necessarily working, and then work around with your third parties to help them. And I call it a win-win situation, because we had scenarios where the third parties were appreciating that support. And that is what a partnership is all about. Last but not least, I think Caroline touched this, as well as Fernando touched this. It's about the values, and I call it the culture. Have you got visibility of your third party's culture, or the model around which they train, they coach, they reward their own colleagues? And in a crisis, the first and more or less the most powerful piece that you hold is your reputation. And there's a huge risk if you do not have built that strategy around understanding the culture of the third parties that you're dealing with, and have understood their coaching, rewarding, and investment plans, you could fall into a very high reputation risk element. I will give a very simple example. When we have collection sort of activities or servicing activities done through third parties, it's absolutely critical. We started the discussions talking to these individuals and these teams, saying, what is the right way to talk to a customer? What are the best methodologies you can follow through to empathize with your customer when you speak to them? And that is very simple piece of activity, but it was very critical for us, because for us, what matters is, are we standing there for our customers? And can our third parties work with us? Do they live that value? Do they build that culture that supports us? So if I summarize the key pieces of a strategy to answer your question, Rishik, is the strategy execution discussions have to look at four elements. And these are my personal learnings. And those personal learnings are having a catalog, having visibility of your third parties and the controls that are built around them, and the engagement model. Second is more on to, do we have robust governance, the right MI? Do we have the right data to talk to our senior leaders, both within your firm as well as through third parties, when things are not necessarily working in the right way? And third one is more on to, have we got the capacity that you can actually share with your third parties, especially on the testing, if you're dealing with certain third parties who might not necessarily have that capability to test certain processes for you, so that you understand you are doing the right thing. And the fourth and most important, which falls holistically around the organization, is the values and the culture. Have you got the right culture within your organization that maps with the third party, and your third party culture, does it tally back into what you as an organization live through? So I would say, yes, it is a must do. How do we do it? These are my learnings in the last maybe 8 months.
Excellent. I think that's very well summarized, Jacinta. Thank you for that. I think another important point that I picked up here is you talked about understanding your operating model end to end. So we often hear the word KYC in the world of banking, know your customer. I remove the C and I say know yourself first, because that is critical to making your business and your vendor ecosystem successful. Now shifting gears a bit here. So this is for Fernanda. So the focus on reputational and consumer trust has magnified over the last 1 year. I think there's a greater focus on enforcing integrity, across not only the organization, but also the extended ecosystem. So, my question to you as an ethics and compliance professional, Fernanda, how do you think companies entrust or ensure adherence of third parties to promote and protect a company's ethical culture? And if I can just take it to the next level, that in the pandemic scenario, when everything is in a state of crisis, how does organizations convey and enforce the integrity standards and the messaging across the organization?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. It's a multifaceted approach, I would say, but I'll start by saying this. The third party engagement with you and with you as a company, and understanding and abiding by your values and integrating your values into what they do is a marathon, not a sprint. Okay. So if you found yourself in the beginning of the pandemic concerned about the integrity and how third parties would abide by your values, but you haven't thought about this before, you're late. You're very late to the game. Okay. The multifaceted approach that we embody, it has several different pillars that together create a system, right? Create a system and processes. I'll start by saying that we've been talking about this in this panel about relationship, right? What are the touch points that your company has with that third part with those third parties with let's say your dealers, your distributors? How do your employees engage with those third parties? Are they constantly communicating on the company's integrity values and company's integrity efforts? Is this an afterthought in a meeting? Or is that how you start the meeting, right? Is this a quiet background? Or is this a front and center message of you're a dealer or distributor of my company, you're an agent of my company, we won't accept business you bring unless they are centered in integrity. So this relationship and what I call between your employee or your team and this third party needs to be constantly centered in your main values. Okay? So let me say this will be like a tone setting, or in a compliance program, what we call tone at the top. At the very top of that relationship, that's how you start. The next thing I would say is you can't just rely on third party on the third party to provide training to the employee. I would suggest that you go a step further. And how can you put together training that convey this message around your values? And when you figure that out, deploy this training and track it. Right? Track adherence, track completion rates. Most importantly, track who's not taking the training, so you can follow up with the supplier or third party and say, why is this person not taking the training? Right? And again, as I said before, this cannot be a snapshot. It needs to be a constant live roll of folks that need to be trained, and this list needs to be constantly updated because of attrition and people being onboarded and etc. Another facet of this, another pillar of this, is communication. What kind of communication do we have with that supplier, dealer, distributor, vendor? Are you only talking about sales goals? Are you only talking about the latest PO? You should be constantly communicating with them. And I'm thinking, dealers, distributors, agents, joint ventures. You should be constantly communicating with them, tailoring messaging for them that makes sense to the business they face, okay? To the risk they face and the business they bring. If you're only talking about or giving generic messaging, generic communication, you need to uphold my company's values, or you need to abide by our code of conduct, but you don't really talk about how. You don't really give concrete examples. You don't really talk about risks they may be facing and how they should go about them. You're missing a big piece of communicating. I was going to say too, think creatively, think with creativity here. It does not necessarily need to be a boring long email written by your law firm or your legal counsel talking about the importance of your values. Think about the head of a business unit recording a little video, short video that you could deploy to the suppliers. You could deploy to your third parties, talking about why the value is important. You probably have a third party portal. Why not uploading things there, like resource guides? Another thing that generates a lot of traction in a good way is talking about failures. The leadership nowadays goes through, being authentic and being vulnerable. I'm a big advocate that companies do that too, to generate trust. So you should be talking about your failures more often, talking about how that specific vendor, you don't have maybe you can not specifically mention the name, but how that specific situation was a learning and how you can engage the vendors you have so it does not happen again. So that risk is mitigated. As a person who has legal training and an attorney in 2 different countries, I say have a really good agreement. And not only an agreement that talks about how you're going to sell or they're going to buy or how they're going to buy and you're going to sell, but with strong compliance clauses that you can look into if you need to enforce anything or if there's a breach. And that goes through having an audit clause, then you enforce it and use it. Because having it there and not using it is the same as not having it there at all. The other thing I think Jacinta talked a little bit about was auditing, right? The third level of defense. Use that clause that you have there in the agreement and audit them constantly. Trust, but verify. And as I said before, what you're not tracking, you're not measuring. When we think about the pandemic and how it affects third-party risk, the way I think about it is, what are the risks that are already there that are aggravated by the pandemic? Right? You may be having more facility visits and facility inspections. Those third parties may be interacting more with certain government officials because of that, just talking specifically about bribery risk. Right? Think about risks that you have not thought before. For instance, everybody is online now, everybody's using Zoom and other platforms all the time. That may create some fatigue in communication and messaging, fatigue in reading emails. So when you're trying to communicate, as I said, think creatively about it. And last but not least, create a speak-up culture where people will feel comfortable bringing things to you. And that is not only for your employees, but for your third parties too. Again, that goes through the idea of partnership, that the company can approach your company and say, listen, I have an issue here, and can we partner to fix it? So those would be my main facets or pillars, I would say, to instill a culture of integrity in the third party that you engage with.
Thanks, Fernanda. That's incredibly insightful. I think you talked about the importance of having a top-down culture setting exercise and keeping a messaging that is simple and easy for people to understand, which is so critical. Um, I'm conscious that we're running out of time, so I'll try and make this quick. So I think let's kind of shift gears again, and we move to the financial services of the world. So Caroline, this a question for you. So in the financial sector, the business models are evolving towards faster payments, quicker response to customers, pushing the organization, right? Let's say, for example, the fintech, we are all talking about opening an account in less than 30 seconds for that matter. So this has increased the regulatory attention on accountability, risk, fraud, misconduct, crimes, etc., etc. So, as a legal advisor, can you indicate what new risk areas should be considered before engaging with a third party?
Yes, sure. First of all, I wouldn't say that these areas are new risk area. I think they have been put in front of their importance have been put frontline because of the pandemic, but even before that, just because of the evolving business model in the financial industry, specifically in the payment industry, because as you said, fintechs are more and more part of the equation. I would say that and Asinda and Fernanda already pointed that out. So it's as someone else said before, it's hard to come after such brilliant panelists. But the reputational risk is fundamental. Before you enter an agreement, you have to know your vendor, your third-party service provider, and you have to know them inside out. For fintechs, it's even more important because they're less renowned. So you cannot just base yourself on readily available information you find online. You might not be able to find feedback from customers. You have to build a relationship with that fintech before they become your partner. You have to talk with them and to really learn who they are before signing an agreement. One of the reasons why it's important is because you have to know their ethics. Sure, you have to do all this security check before, but it's something to represent something in an agreement or say you're able to do it or present a good structure. But especially from a security point of view, the weakest link is always a human. So you have to know the humans behind this company. And in the pandemic, my experience, and I'm sure it's the experience so many people out there faced, was that when you had already built a trust relationship with your service provider, and trust cannot happen if you don't know your partner and ensure that their culture is aligned to yours. When you had built that trust before the pandemic, it was easier to have a discussion with them. And hopefully your partners were as flexible as some of ours were when we needed to discuss with them to update some process during the pandemic. Or for instance, just before the pandemic, the networks, MasterCard and Visa, were about to change their interchange rate. In most of the jurisdiction where it had to happen, I think in the US it was the case, the change to the interchange was putting a bigger burden on the merchant shoulders. But in Canada, it wasn't the case. So when the pandemic came, the networks decided to postpone the change to the interchange. But for us, and especially as a credit union, it had an impact on our members, our merchant customers. So we wanted to ensure that this postponement would not affect our customers. And we discussed with the networks and we reached a solution. But in order to do that, we needed to have that relationship in place. So of course, when we are talking about networks, you don't have a lot of choices out there. But our partners in this specific situation were very open, and there was a dialogue that happened between us, and their flexibility in having this dialogue helped us provide a better service to our members, customers. Also, with fintechs, but with any service provider really, when you talk about reputational risk, you have to keep in mind your specificity. So as you said, Rashid, know yourself first before knowing your partner, because for instance, my company is located in Quebec, and Quebec is a province in Canada where you speak French. So if a service provider is not able to provide a good service in French, well, this is a very big problem for us. And not only from a legal standpoint, because there's a law in place that forces services to be offered in French, but also from a reputational point of view, because if our third-party service provider does not offer services in good French, well, we basically make front page of newspapers. So it's important that before going ahead into a relationship with a third-party service provider, we take into account our own specificity and make sure that we have the handles in the agreement to ensure throughout the process that the service provider will abide by applicable laws, but also by will be able to meet our specificities. And to do that, well, you have to follow your agreements. And well, Fernanda said that it doesn't have to be written in lawyers' word in an agreement, and I cannot agree more. But I think the point is, a commercial lawyer cannot be just a lawyer. It has to be a business advisor, and you have to work hand in hand with your business advisors, including your lawyers, in order to make sure that your agreements are good agreements and provide you with the tools you need to control your risk. And as an agreement is a tool, you also have to be willing to use that tool if needed. And there was some need to use the tool during the pandemic, that's for sure.
Fantastic. And I think you summarized it pretty well. So it's not only just important to do the initial due diligence, it's also important to make sure that it's drafted very tightly in a legal document, which confirms the services that you would be expecting from your vendor. It's very important. I did have one question for Sadhna, but I've been told that we have run out of time. Again, we had an amazing bunch of passionate panelists talking about third-party management, and we expected this, that we are going to run out of time. So I would probably have to wrap this session now. We would not be able to take any further questions that have come in our Q&A. But I would like to thank all the panelists for their time and for the insightful discussion that we've had. Hopefully, for the audience, you found this session useful. And we would be happy to welcome you to the next session. Thank you.